And Marion, what do you think the top 3 areas are where companies are really seeing security breaches?
The very first one is from a technological perspective. And this is another area that companies are not very well versed in. Some are not even aware that it exists. But there's a lot of intelligence work that goes on with the security agencies from other countries that are literally tapping into our computers and trying to find out our trade secrets and what we're building and what we're coming up with. So a lot of the times they'll either have people on the inside who are working to get them this intelligence, or they create these Trojans and other viruses and things like that to get into the computer systems. Now a lot of times these companies have no idea that they've even been hacked until it's too late, or until something happens and they're saying, wait a minute, that's our prototype, or why has it already been released? That kind of thing. So it's incredibly important for companies to understand that no matter what you might think, well, I don't really build anything, or I'm not really doing anything that would attract any spies or anything like that. But it doesn't matter. They may be trying to get to one of your service providers. They might be trying to get to one of your suppliers. You never know. They will definitely use you. So far, our biggest incident rate is actually from China, and number 2 would be the Soviet Union. So that would be the first one. The second one is false companies. Now that's a very big danger, and that's where companies start to do business, where legitimate companies start to do business with other companies that have been set up to look like they're legitimate, but they're actually being funded or run for specific reasons. And sometimes these specific reasons can be to confiscate money, to launder money, to bring in weapons or even mass destruction elements. And I have seen a lot of times where people will contract, especially with freight companies, to move their freight, and then the freight goes missing because they didn't do their due diligence to make sure that this freight company was actually legitimate. That happens quite a bit.
And I'm going to go ahead and interject right there. Miriam, a lot of our clients buy competitive intelligence packages from us,
Okay.
to where we do a lot of competitive intelligence about their competitors.
Yes.
And I mean, all the executives that have seen our packages know that we can come back with a stack of information this thick of CDs and paper and sales presentations and all their inner workings, pricing, all the sensitive information is very easy to get.
Exactly.
And just even on a competitive side, you don't want that released, and you do want to have an education for your employees, even a meeting within your company, explaining to people how important it is that they protect this intellectual property.
Absolutely.
Secondly, the training that you're talking about, to where they know, okay, all of a sudden this freight company is way cheaper than the rest of them. What is going on? I mean, there have to be some red flags that come up there.
There are red flags, and usually if you're checking their licensing and things like that, usually it's fairly new, meaning they haven't been in business very long. And I'm not saying that to discredit any new businesses that are, but that's something that you should look into a little bit further. If they are fairly new, it's not a bad idea to get references or the names of other companies that they've actually worked for, and not just stop there, but actually talk to these references and make sure that they really are legitimate.
That's a lot. I mean, I look at the typical dispatch guy, sitting behind the glass with his radio and his phone, and I can't see him going through, this type of background checks, if you will, on companies. I think that this does have to come down from the executives down.
Exactly.
And really tell him how to be able to take care of him and watch over his little area.
Yeah, so most of the time it won't be dispatching or anybody working on the dock or anything like that does that. Usually that would come from corporate. Somebody corporate should be doing these background checks. They should be checking. There are websites out there, like Customs and Border Protection has one where you can check certain companies to see if they are legitimate. So there's resources out there. It's just a matter of using them. And I mean, I think some of us get to the point where if it looks good, then it should be good, rather than actually taking the time to figure out who are these people really, and what is it that they want from us if they're not legitimate. And I have run into cases like that, so it's not uncommon.
what a great resource. And I apologize for getting you off track a little bit there, but
No problem.
especially with the people that are watching this are all executives, and most of them have seen our competitive intelligence packages, and that information has to come from somewhere.
Absolutely.
And it comes from weaknesses in security. It comes from lack of communication to your employees on
Right.
how to protect your sensitive information.
Yes.
And if we can get it, then that means that somebody else can get it as
Exactly.
well.
Yes.
So I apologize for interrupting you. So we have information, is one of the top three problems that they have. Do you want to either continue to expound on that or go over the other two weaknesses?
Yeah, let's go over the other two. The other
Mhm.
one was, we call them Trojan companies because they're not set up for legitimate purposes. Usually there's some kind of criminal intent going on in the background. And then the last one is, a lot of times, not only freight companies, but any legitimate company that's doing any type of importing, exporting, or even the movement of freight, they are the ones who are going to be targeted by terrorist organizations to smuggle the items that we just talked about earlier, which was weapons, humans, or drugs. So those would be the top three.
Wow. I'm just amazed at how vulnerable and such a high risk.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, I was doing a study not long ago, and we found out that only about 10% of the companies in the United States practice some type of security procedures and processes, which was really scary because then that says that 90% are completely vulnerable and open to any type of attack, whether it's from a disaster perspective, natural disaster, or even a man-made disaster. So it's pretty enlightening.
Yeah, absolutely. What's really piquing my interest, what really motivated you to get into this and to start educating people on this? I mean, there had to be some sort of trigger event, if you may, or something that really sparked your interest in it. What was it that brought you into this?
Well, I'll tell you, it started out, like we were saying, 14 years ago. I started out importing and exporting, just a typical job, didn't really think much about it. But as I got into the process, I started figuring out that there was a lot of things that people could do to be more proactive, to be able to move their product a lot easier than what we were seeing. There was things getting hung up in customs, shipments being pulled over for inspection, and usually it was small things, but it's just a lack of awareness. Companies just didn't know. And so I just saw that they were spending a lot of money trying to correct problems after the fact rather than if they caught them before it got to that point. From then I started going into the cargo security side of it because unfortunately we were seeing a lot of incidents, especially along the border, and that kind of opened my eyes to some of the things that were going on. And a lot of times law enforcement, they themselves weren't aware, which I know it's not far-fetched, it's just cargo is not one of their specialties that they deal with. So unless you actually report something stolen, which doesn't happen very often, then they're not too keen or too aware on how to handle those situations. And then I started doing my PhD program, and that's where the study and the research came in. And now that I know that we're vulnerable to all these different types of terrorist attacks, that's kind of what started the ball rolling, is when I saw that statistic that I told you about, the 10% of companies are actually prepared. That's what piqued my interest. Just because anytime there's a disaster or a terrorist event, it cripples the economy. It hurts people, things shut down, jobs go away, and and that's just the economic impact. We're not even talking about the emotional or the psychological impact that goes along with it. And so I felt that with all the knowledge and experience that I've gained over the years, this is something that could be used for that, to help people better prepare. And then the better prepared you are, the better chance you have of recovering from whatever you're experiencing.
So from an altruistic and American standpoint, I know that there are a lot of freight companies that are watching. Get CTPAT certified.
Absolutely.
And educate your people. On many different fronts. On the front of the business side, if you get CTPAT certified, then market it and advertise it and let them know that you're CTPAT certified and that you're active about this, and help to raise that awareness on the other end, because I can see that it'll help you to monetize and to gain profitability on that side. I know that one of the huge problems is commoditization.
Yes.
They go, oh, well, this LTL carrier charges 50 cents a pound or whatnot for shipping class 50 freight.
Mhm.
I know that price is way off, folks, so don't catch me on that. But at any rate, they have a certain price point for the class 50 freight.
Right.
And it becomes across the board, they're like, well, they call it the next guy. Well, he's 1 cent cheaper, but he has 1 cent liability, and well, come to find out this other guy has 1 cent liability. Well, they're trying to find discerning reasons on why they should do business with somebody else. This is one of those discerning points that will separate you from your competition and
Absolutely.
get you away from the commoditization.
Yes.
And I think that the rising tide rises all ships. So it will force your competition to come up to where you are. And that's a position where you want to be in any industry, is to where you're forcing your competition to come up in credibility,
Right.
in service, and you always want to be the person that everybody's trying to catch.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
I could see that as being very, very advantageous, and you should be able to grab that with your marketing department and really take hold of this. And it could take months, even years, for your competition to catch up to you.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
So fantastic. I appreciate that. And I'm big on technology and where are things going next.